Good evening, better everybody. For somebody, it's maybe morning. I don't know from what countries are you switching on. Ojaswini, are you from India or from Moscow?
I'm in dormitory 4 in Moscow right now.
Ah,
In MIT.
dormitory. Yes, yes. Okay. So, is it comfortable or you feel cold a little bit?
No, sir, it's very hot inside because the ventilators are working very nice. Heaters.
Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. So you feel fine, okay? And you are prepared to listen to a lecture.
Yes,
Mm.
sir.
Yes, okay. So we finished with the Neoplatonists, and we said that the history of European civilization underwent a great crisis after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. So usually this period is called the Dark Ages. But still there was some interesting phenomena. Well, I would say the important date is uh, I see here is the chat. The important date is 529 when Saint Benedict uh, started a new monastic order, Saint Benedict. Well, perhaps you don't know about him much, but just try to memorize this name because with Saint Benedict started the new monastic movement. He issued also the rule for his monks, and according to this rule, some of the monks were given the task to copy the manuscripts. So in these Benedictine monasteries, there were so-called scriptoria, or scriptoria. In Latin, it's places like library where, or better say, just rooms where there were all necessary for copying. So the at first the pergamon, then the paper, and so um, the monks were given the task to copy the manuscripts, scriptoria. So that's how many ancient manuscripts were preserved, and so um, the whole, or maybe not the whole, of course, but the important part of the ancient Greek and Roman heritage was preserved there. So another interesting phenomenon is that in Ireland, uh, Ireland, um, there were certain centers of learning. Well, due to perhaps the isolated character of this country, that it is somewhere in the outskirts of Europe, due perhaps to some, well, uh, psychological characteristics of the Irish people, well, and their passion for learning. So Ireland became a certain center where ancient heritage, cultural heritage was preserved. And Ireland even sent missionaries to Europe to promote Christianity, and with Christianity came learning. Well, the most maybe spectacular um, um, uh, of those missionaries was Saint Columban. Columban, well, uh, who started the monastery, and his pupil Saint uh, Gallus, or Gall, we can say Gall. I think Gallus may be better. So he started the monastery, which is known even now, because even in Switzerland there is a city, Sankt. Gallen. This city still exists in Switzerland, and also there exists a monastery which was founded by Saint Gallus, who was the pupil of Saint Columban. So it is like a vivid example of Irish influence in Europe. Okay, so some say that even some manuscripts written in Gaelic, that's the Irish tongue, are preserved in St. Gallen. I haven't seen this and I haven't confirmed this information, but of course it is a widely known fact that St. Gallen is the place associated with Irish influence. In St. Gallen, there was a large scriptorium, and later in the 15th century, Italian humanists visiting St. Gallen found in the treasures of the monastic library many important ancient manuscripts. For example, the poem of Lucretius, this famous Roman poet. The poem was called the rerum natura, or on the nature of things. Well, it is interesting that this poem is atheistic in its content. So it's interesting how monks copied this poem in spite of its contents, which was diametrically opposed to Christian message. So we can say that monks were very obedient if they received certain demand or so they had no other choice than to obey to their abbot, and if the abbot insisted on copying some manuscript, they just blindly obeyed. And that's why, perhaps due to some enlightened abbot, this poem of Lucretius of the 1st century before Christ was somehow preserved in the library in St. Gallen, and it was found there by Italian humanist Poggio Bracellini. Well, you shouldn't. It's not necessary to memorize these concrete facts. Only it's an illustration how this heritage was kind of preserved in during the Dark Ages. Well, of course, the Christianization of France and England somehow helped the dissemination of learning, like the Islamization also, because Islam brought, for example, learning the Quran and Arabic language and philosophy and theology. So learning was sort of very much esteemed in Islamic countries, and so culture flourished in, say, in Baghdad, in Damascus, even in Spain, at that time occupied by the Arabs. I mean, starting from the 8th century. But also, the same can be said about Christianity. So Christianity is a religion of the book. So literacy is indispensable to be a good Christian. So you cannot understand the gospel, or you cannot understand the Bible, the Old Testament, without learning, without grammar, without skills of sort of reading and also hermeneutics, so understanding of the text. So that's also, I think, well, Christianity was at first received by King of Franks, Chlodwig or Clovis. He was the king of the Franks, the German tribe which gave birth to modern Frenchmen. Franks. This happened in 496. Then followed England a century later. St. Augustine of Canterbury, sent by Pope Gregory I from Rome to England, started a mission in Kent, and soon he was he could convert the Anglo-Saxon king Ethelbert. This happened around 597. So these two events, and later the Christianization of Germany by St. Columban and other missionaries from Ireland and from other places, St. Boniface, these events helped also the dissemination of learning and the conservation or preservation or transmission of ancient cultural heritage, including philosophy, in the West, in the Latin West. But only in the 9th century, and also from Ireland, came first, I would say, original European thinker. He was called John Scotus Eriugena. John Scotus Eriugena. Well, if you just attentively look at his name, you can understand that he was Irish, because Eriugena, it means, or Eriugena sometimes, it means that he was born in the island, in Ireland, which this island was called Eri in Gaelic, in Irish language. So he was born in the country of Eri. Genus is in Latin just gender also, and also a native of something. So because gignosko in Greek and also in Latin, genitus means to be born. So Eriugena means born in Ireland. Scotus doesn't mean that he was a Scottish origin, but Scots was the common name of Scottish tribes who lived in the north of the island of England, and also of Irish. So it doesn't contradict the Irish origin of John Scotus Eriugena. And this monk, who lived in France most of his time, because he was invited by kings of France to teach there in Aachen and in other cities of the then founded Western Roman Empire. But he also wrote, he was not only teaching and translating from Greek some works on theology and philosophy, but he also composed an original treatise called the Divisione Naturae, in Latin, of course. Well, we can translate it as on the division of nature. So nature was divided into 4 parts. First was natura, creans, et creatum. Well, excuse me for Latin, but I think I will translate it simultaneously in English. Creatum. So if you copy this, put it in double commas and copy it, and then Google the whole phrase, you will certainly find John Scotus Eriugena, some book, scholarly book on him, or his own book on the division of nature. So what is natura, creans, and non creatum? It means nature that creates and is not itself created. So this means God, of course, because God is a creator and he is not created by anybody. Then comes natura creans, natura creans et creata. Creans et creata. What does it mean? It means nature that creates and is created. So this can be man, for example, because man can create, say, he can write a book, or he can build a house, or he can carve a statue, or he can compose a poem, or he can procreate children. So all these are examples of creation, of being a creator. So man creator is normally, and you see creative spirit, initiative, innovation. All these are signs of creative nature of man. I hope that you are also to some extent creators. But you were all created. I don't, well, if you are atheist, you can say that you were created by nature, not by God. But nevertheless, you came into existence at a certain time, say the date of your birth, but there was the most important maybe date, the date of your conception. So this is the crucial dates of your life. So without conception, there would be no man, okay? So you are created, well, by nature, or by your parents, or by God. It doesn't matter now, but of course it mattered for John Scotus Eriugena, who was, of course, a believer and a Christian. So he understood creation in the sense that God created man. Okay, but not only man, but all nature. Nature creans means all the living nature, even seeds of plants. They also possess something of a creative nature, because they can, they say, procreate, okay? So they can multiply themselves, proliferate, okay? So this is the common feature of all living things. So, and the so-called seeds of the logos, or of this creative spirit of God, are disseminated everywhere, especially among the living creatures, animals, plants, and especially man. Well, this is the second nature, but there will be the third, natura non creans et creata. Natura non creans et creata. Well, these are inanimate things like minerals, which are just which were created, of course, at some time, like our Earth. It didn't exist from all eternity. It was created. Well, we also can say by natural processes, or by a certain evolution of the stars, of nebulas, or interstellar matter, but still it is created, and it didn't create, because before before life appeared on Earth, nothing was created. Like on the moon. The moon is just a lifeless matter, okay? So we cannot say that the moon creates something. Well, also the minerals, also the mountains as they are, without flora and fauna, they are examples of nature that doesn't create, but is created. And now the fourth like possibility, and the last one, natura non creans and non creata. et creans et non creata, which is also God, because God is not created. But what God? What kind of God? It's a God. After he created the world, he had a rest on the day of Sabbath. Okay, sabbatical. So God takes sabbatical, and he doesn't create. He ceases to create. He's just having a rest. And so this God who is resting, who is not creating, is like the goal or purpose for all creation. So God can be seen in two ways. First, as a creator of all things, and also as the goal of all things, because all things tend to this passive God who sort of is at rest and is waiting all his creations to come to him and also have a rest, perpetual rest. This is a paradise. Okay, well, this was something new, because you cannot find this of in any other treatise written by somebody else. And it had no continuation, because John Scotus Eriugena was accused of heresy, and that is why nobody dared to continue his way of thinking. Okay, so he was like here a loner, so he didn't leave a school of his own. So this well, but nevertheless, some monks copied the manuscript, so it is preserved till our days. Then it was edited and published, and now you have a lot of publications. I'm not sure that there are translations even into English, because of the difficulty of the language of John Scotus Eriugena. So I'm perhaps only fragments are translated into English, and certainly nothing is translated, almost nothing is translated into Russian. Well, because of maybe a lack of financial assistance to the project, because every translation should find some financial support, and who will just give lend money or give money for such project as translating an obscure treatise of the dating back to the 9th century from Latin into Russian? And you have to find a skillful translator who can see and understand all the subtleties of the thinking, well, I would say heavily theological thinking of John Scotus Eriugena. And well, I think it is, well, maybe it is possible, but still not done, not finished. Okay, so here is but of course every textbook on history of Western philosophy, and even I think even Bertrand Russell mention this treatise of John Scotus Eriugena, because it started like independent thinking in the West. Okay, now the second example of independent thinking comes from the 11th century, and here we have to memorize a new name, Saint Anselm of Canterbury. He was Italian, but he was the Bishop of Canterbury. Why could it happen so? Canterbury is in England. You remember that England was baptized or Christianized in the end of the 6th century. So because all this mission started in Kent, it started in Canterbury, and so the great abbey was built there, and there was established the archbishop see, and the Archbishop of Canterbury became like a leader or a primate of all the English church, but subordinate to the Pope of Rome. So Anselm of Canterbury was just having this position of the Archbishop of Canterbury, and he was a very educated man, and he also invented something quite new, which is called the ontological proof of the existence of God. Of the existence of God. So you see, what is that? Ontological. Why we say ontological? On and genitive case, ontos is just being in Greek. So ontos. Ontos is a genitive case. So ontos is being in Greek. So so ontology is the science of about being. Well, it seems curious. What science can there be about being as it's in itself? Well, but even this phrase from Hamlet's soliloquy, to be or not to be, that is the question, is, we can call it ontologically laden, okay, ontologically, because this is a question about being. Okay, so we have 10 minutes still for this part of the conference, but I think it will be continued, yes, Ojasvini? The same link will be valid, yes? Now, please follow this ontological proof. So ontological proof starts from just the perfection of God's being. So God is defined as the most perfect being. Now we can say, if God's definition, if by definition God is the most perfect being, then it should exist, because if God exists only in imagination, it wouldn't be the most perfect being, because to be, really to exist, is a perfection of a kind. Because if you exist only in imagination, you're like a shadow, you are not real thing, okay? So in order to be perfect, you should exist. So if we define God as perfect, he should exist, otherwise he wouldn't be God. So we cannot imagine the inexistent God, because it will be contradiction in terms. So from definition, it follows that God should exist, okay? It's like a puzzle of a kind. And I'm teaching for a quarter of a century already in Moscow Physical Technical Institute, and mostly I teach, of course, in Russian, but the same, I teach more or less the same subject, and we come when we come to Anselm of Canterbury and speak with puzzled, they see here some kind of a sophistry, okay? How from the definition can follow the existence, okay? We can define anything, we can imagine any definition of any kind of notions, but how can from the definition follow the existence, okay? Well, not only my students are puzzled by that, but also some theologians who lived after Anselm. For example, Thomas Aquinas a famous philosopher and theologian who lived in the 13th century, criticized this ontological proof of Anselm. Why? For what reason? Because according to Thomas Aquinas, we cannot transit from the from the domain of beings, from the domain of non-imaginary beings to the domain of real beings. So we can imagine everything. For example, we can imagine a horse with the head of a man. It will be Centaurus, okay? We can imagine a living doll, like girls and boys imagine that their dolls are living things, okay? But from this imagination, nothing happens. The dolls do not become living things, and Centaurus does not exist. Like, and also unicorns, you know, there's many imaginary animals. They do not exist due to only our imagination. So when we say that we imagine, or we imagine the most perfect being, and we call it God, so from this doesn't follow that God will necessarily exist. We can say that in our imagination, God is the most perfect of imaginary beings. We imagine the most perfect being, and but from this doesn't follow that this product of our imagination should so-called materialize, okay? This was the argument of Thomas Aquinas. Well, we later will come to him and say how he, instead of this ontological proof, he sort of invented 5 other proofs. But these proofs would be from nature, from nature to the cause of nature. So they will all be built on this cause and effect relation. So if we see the effect, means the world, we should ask what is the cause of this world. So this is, according to Thomas Aquinas, the unique way to prove the existence of God. Well, later these proofs will be challenged by David Hume and Immanuel Kant. This will happen in the 18th century, and we'll speak about that later. Now we have to just give tribute to Anselm of Canterbury, for Ambi was built in no Canterbury. It's not Canterbury. It was the cathedral, Abbey, not Ambi, but Abbey, Canterbury. If Ojaswini will find, because she has the right to give a demonstration of the screen, she can find you Canterbury just in Google, the article in Wikipedia, for example, Canterbury, and so you.
Canterbury, okay, I can share the screen after searching right now.
Yes, you can. If you can find it, just show everybody the cathedral and the abbey, so just everybody can see how it looks like. It's not Abbey, it's Abbey. It's a monastery, and a cathedral also, Gothic cathedral in Canterbury. So if you can find it, yes. So I cannot make the demonstration of the screen, so only Ojaswini, who is a host of our conference, can show us Canterbury. Well, we'll wait for her to to do it, Ojaswini. Can you do it for us?
Yes, sir. I'm gonna
Just
share the screen just 1 second.
yes, 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 please. Yes, I agree with, yes, just look at the picture before the session ends, yes. Okay, thank you very much. So it's impressive, yes, Canterbury Cathedral. So, you know, it was founded in 597, and because it was the date of the baptism of England, but was then rebuilt in the 11th century. Just yes, thank you. At the time, Saint Anselm of Canterbury was the archbishop there. So, well, if you visit England, then you can also visit this abbey and look at it. Have a look, okay? Now we have less than 1 minute, so we'll start another conference and we'll continue. I have enough material for the second part. From Serbia or from Barcelona?
Serbia.
Serbia, yes. And somebody's from Barcelona, I think. Maybe.
I'm not sure if they're here.
Okay. But also maybe somebody are following us from Nigeria.
No.
Yes, Prof.
We are many.
From
We are
Nigeria.
many. Yes.
Okay. So you see, so we are sort of transmitting our knowledge to the whole world, okay? So, okay, then we'll continue, and we have another important figure which played a certain role in history of philosophy. It is Frenchman Pierre Abelard. Abelard. The J is not pronounced. Pierre Abelard. So he lived in the 12th century, and he is important for creating a so-called scholastic philosophy, a culture of disputations. First of, he wrote in two important works. One of them in Latin is called Sic et Non. Well, sic et non means yes and no. So what is that? Why such a mysterious, well, I would say headline or title of the book? Sic and Non is a theological treatise, but composed in a pair of opposites. So there are proofs of say one thesis, and there's the proofs of the quite opposite thesis. Well, just one example to be more clear for you. For example, the example is this one. The question is put in such a way: what is more profitable and more meritorious, blind faith or faith sort of strengthened by reason and by argument? So what we are to aim at? Well, Saint Anselm, whom I mentioned already, he insisted on how to say enlightened faith, and he had a motto, credo ut intelligam, means I believe in order to understand. This was the motto of Anselm. So he was the proponent of an enlightened faith, the faith that seeks understandings, or also fides, in Latin fides quaerens intellectum. So faith that seeks to be understood. Quaerens intellectum. Well, of course, it is it is good that such mottos existed in Europe. So it promoted intellectual activity. So otherwise you could be accused of heresy just for being an intellectual. This would be the end of all intellectual enterprise in Europe. But fortunately, the position of St. Anselm was predominant, and so intellectuals were not banned or banished from the church. Okay, they could find their occupation there. So defending the faith. Okay, so if you are an intellectual and you happen to live, say, in the 12th century, nobody would kill you. Repeat the name, Pierre Abelard. I wrote it in the, what name? The name of Pierre Abelard or the name of Saint Anselm of Canterbury? Well, Pierre Abelard wrote the book Sic et Non, which starts with this question. The question is this one: whether a blind faith is more meritorious than the faith enlightened by the intellect. And I remember I sort of gave you the example of one position, which is the position of St. Anselm, that faith should be enlightened, that blind faith is no good. But if you read attentively the gospel, especially the gospel according to St. John, you will find there the story about the disciple whose name was Thomas, and he didn't want to believe unless he put his fingers in the wounds of Jesus Christ himself. So Jesus showed him his wounds after his resurrection, according to this story of the gospel, but he reprimanded Thomas for not having enough faith. He said that you believed because you saw, but the blessed are those who believed but didn't see. Okay, so this means that if you have blind faith without reasoning, without arguments, then you are more blessed than the intellectual who has enlightened faith supported by arguments, for example, supported by the ontological proof of the existence of God, okay, or other proofs. Well, I couldn't say that intellectuals were executed by the church, but they were looked upon with suspicion. So, there was no such tradition as just intellectual pursuits within the church. So, for example, there could be a vocation of a missionary, of a bishop, of a priest, of a monk, hermit, but there was not such vocation as intellectual or doctor, you see. So these persons were new for the church, and the church looked at them with suspicion. Well, of course, we can give an example of St. Augustine of Hippo, the famous Blessed Augustine, which is known even in Russia. He's called in Russia the Blessed Augustine, but you know him as St. Augustine. He's the author of famous books, The Confessions and on the City of God. But these intellectuals lived before the collapse of the Roman Empire. Then there followed a period of the so-called Dark Ages, when there were almost no such intellectuals. So when they started to appear, and the first one was John Scott Eriugena, whom I mentioned you in the first part of my lecture, he was considered to be heretic. And there were others who were accused of heresy. They were not executed, but they were banished from teaching positions in the church, okay? There's execution, it's just too strong a word, okay? So banishment is quite enough for an intellectual to disappear from public space. Okay, for example, if I will be banished from Moscow Physical Technical Institute for giving suspicious lectures, okay, suspicious in contents, so then this will be the example of the banishment of an intellectual. Okay, this I'm joking, of course, but you understand what that intellectual's life of an intellectual is not always just sunny. So it has its dark side. Okay, for example, jealousy and envy and suspicion, and suspicion from political figures, from church authorities. They say, well, you are thinking too much, you are dangerous. Okay, so, well, I can, of course, give you much more examples, but I think the example of John Scott Eriugena is quite enough. And here in the figure of Saint Anselm, we see that the Archbishop dared to be an intellectual and nothing happened. But still, the words about the meritorious character of blind faith continued to exist. Nobody sort of erased them from the Gospels. So there was like a certain ambiguous or just uncertainty. So whether to believe blindly or to find some arguments to strengthen your belief. So Pierre Abelard put it in this way: seek and known. So there are some arguments from the Gospels, from the holy books, from the fathers of the church in favor of blind faith. And there are also arguments from the same books or from the church leaders in favor of enlightened faith. So what way to choose? So you have authority backing one opinion and authority backing the opposite opinion. So how can you decide? So you are in a state of like uncertainty. You cannot choose between two alternatives. That makes you, this makes a puzzle. And Pierre Abelard has this conclusion that in order to solve the puzzle, you should cultivate disputations or arguments. So you shouldn't just deliver the sermon and the others should just blindly listen to you. You should create the atmosphere of argument when everybody can ask their questions and receive answers, and there can be arguments and counter arguments. So he started a new initiative in the church, or a new, I would say, cultural way in which philosophy flourished, the culture of disputations. Okay, well, I cannot say that in ancient Greece there were no disputations. You remember Socrates and how he argued with his not enemies, but maybe his colleagues who were of other opinions. So this was Socrates was, I think, the best example of like a man who can dispute. But after the reception of Christianity, which is the religion, or like so-called revealed religion. So if we take it literally, so there seems to be no room for disputation. You just receive the revelation and believe, and then sort of conform your life to the received doctrine. Okay, so it seems at first that Christianity is the way to moral perfection and not the way to intellectual disputations. Okay, and even now many Christians think that these disputations, these like subtleties about the faith, the content of the faith, theological questions are sort of not necessary. The most important thing is to practice virtues, to practice humility or fortitude or some other, especially in our world, or you can practice charitable activities, and this will be much more precious than involve yourself in disputations. So we could expect that such culture would never appear in Christian society or in Christian environment. But nevertheless, we see that it really appeared. And the two examples or the three examples I have already produced is John Scott Eriugena, Anselm of Canterbury, and now Pierre Abelard. So with his book, provocative book, Sick and None, he introduced this idea, this culture of disputations in Western society, which then flourished for many centuries in the so-called scholastic philosophy. Well, Pierre Abelard wrote still another book. It is called Disputation between our dialogue between a Jew, a philosopher, from capital letter, and a Christian. Well, what is that? What have they what is the subject of this dialogue? Well, if you read this dialogue, it is translated into Russian, also into English. You can see that a Jew is a Jew. So a Jew is a man who does not recognize Jesus as a Messiah, who practices well, like the Jews of today's world. So especially the Jews who live in Israel, they practice the religion of their fathers, and they do not recognize Jesus Christ as a Messiah, and they do not recognize the validity of the New Testament. Okay, for them, New Testament is a kind of heretical book. Okay, if you take a Jew, Orthodox Jew, you understand. Maybe in Nigeria there are no Jews. I'm not sure. I don't know. But certainly there are some Jews in Moscow, and we have several synagogues.
Not really in Nigeria.
Huh? No Jews?
Not really in Nigeria.
So
they are not common in Nigeria.
You have no synagogues there in Nigeria?
No, not really, sir.
Okay.
We have churches.
Churches, yes, but
for Christianity.
In Moscow, we have so-called pluralistic society. Cynthia, what country are you from, Cynthia? You wrote that we do. So, Cynthia, are you from Nigeria also? Oh, okay, maybe it's in eastern Nigeria. Oh, okay. So this is a big country, Nigeria. I understand. So, well, but in Moscow we have several synagogues. Okay, and I think more than 100,000 Jews in Moscow. So in New York, I think there are still more Jews, and of course there are a lot of Jews in Israel. And if you ask a Jew what is his attitude towards Christianity, you will certainly start a provocative disputation, of course, about who is Jesus, okay? And you will listen to some very maybe subtle arguments that the Jews invented in order to disprove the validity of Christian religion. Also, if we take a philosopher, well, if you read the dialogue, you will see that a philosopher is perhaps an enlightened Muslim, because he speaks about circumcision. So this enlightened Muslim is against both Jewish religion and Christian religion. He produces the religion of the reason, and also enlightened by the idea of the creator, but very sort of, I would say, he's a kind of a Muslim, but not the Muslim which we are now accustomed to, who adhere firmly to the teaching of the Quran. Well, at that time, perhaps there were some Muslims who held the idea of double truth, that there is truth of philosophy and there is truth of the faith. So as philosophers, those Muslims were free to choose, say, Aristotelian philosophy or Platonic philosophy, but as a believers, they just practiced say, the teachings of the Quran, and they didn't find any contradictions here. So now we have this philosopher is an Enlightenment Arab or Muslim who is whose ideal is Aristotle and Plato, ancient philosophers. And then we have a Christian, well, a man who sees in Jesus the Messiah and the Son of God. Okay, so there's a lot to be disputed between them, and Abelard sort of invents arguments to all of them. So the Jew has his own position and his own arguments, the philosopher has his own arguments, and the Christian has his own arguments. So there's a lot of discussion there. Well, I will not enter into details, otherwise I will never end the lecture. So you just can understand that what is important here is the culture of disputations. Okay, and the third book which Abelard wrote is that History of My Calamities, also in Latin, Historia Calamitatum Mearum. Just I started writing them in Latin, but so I will continue. But if you know this word calamity, calamitas in Latin, datum, I'm sorry, mearum. So the history of my calamities. What were his calamities? He was accused by the church of heresy also, and had to defend himself. So he found some bitter enemies among the monks, and also some support also among the monks. So the monks, well, the leaders of monasteries, the abbots, were divided. Some of them, like Peter, called the Venerable, he defended Abelard, and he sort of acted as his protector, okay, or his patron. But there were other abbots who accused Abelard of of heresy, or they suspected him of heresy. Okay, and of course this was due to this culture of disputations. So the church at first regarded this new tradition with suspicion. But then what happened? Then throughout the whole Europe were introduced the new kinds of schools, which were called universities. Well, now universities are a very common thing. And so our institute, Moscow Physical Technical Institute, is also called a university. Okay, so it has a rights of a university. So, well, now it is just a common word. But when they were founded for the first time, also in the 12th century, they were quite new. And what was their aim and agenda? Most universities had 4 faculties. Among them was Faculty of Arts or Faculty of Philosophy. Then there was Faculty of Law. Then there was Faculty of Medicine and Faculty of Theology. But in order to teach theology in the university, a textbook was needed. And this textbook which was called Book of Sentences, well, in Latin, Liber Sententiarum, but I will write just for economizing time, I will write it in English. Book of Sentences, theological sentences, of course, sentences. It was written by the disciple of Abelard, who was called Peter of Lombardy, or Peter Lombard, from Lombardy, from Italy, Lombard. Well, you can say Peter Lombard or Peter from Lombardy. It's just the same, different ways to name him. So this Peter of Lombard wrote this book of sentences, which are also composed as a kind of a disputation. So if there is, for example, the question whether God exists, so there will be arguments against the existence of God and arguments in favor of the existence of God. And it will end with the answer to the objections against the existence of God. So every sentence, every question of this book of sentences is full of arguments for and against a certain thesis. So you cannot just say, well, God exists and that's all, and the matter is finished. No, you should listen to atheists, say to Richard Dawkins, who has his own arguments against the existence of God, or you should listen to Bertrand Russell, or you should listen to Karl Popper or other agnostics or atheists who have a lot of arguments against the existence of God. And you should answer all these arguments and find your own arguments in favor of the existence of God. Only then you will be considered a true theologian, okay? So you should be very, very subtle and very, very sort of educated in order to defend your faith in the environment of just people of different, say, worldviews, okay? And especially in the 12th century, when there are 3 cultures, the Muslim culture, the Jewish culture, and the Christian culture coexisted in Europe. Well, Muslim culture, of course, mainly flourished in Spain, because at that time Spain was divided into 2 parts. One part was Muslim part of Spain, the south of Spain, and the northern part of Spain was Christian. So in some cities in Spain there were many, how to say, a lot of Muslims, and who practiced their own religion. Also in Spain there were at that time a lot of Jews who practiced their religion. So in fact it was a pluralistic society, okay? So you can find in the same city, say Spanish city, you can find a mosque, a synagogue, and a Christian church. Of course, in Paris, there were no mosques at that time, because there were no Muslim population living in France. But the of famous Muslim theologians and philosophers were widely known and translated into Latin. So you could read these books, and from these books you can find the arguments of such celebrities of the Muslim world as Ibn Sina, Ibn Rushd, Al-Ghazali, and others, okay? And also some of the books of the Jewish philosophers like Maimonides were translated into Latin, and so you could also have access to the Jewish wisdom, which was not necessarily coincided with the Christian wisdom. So in this situation of cultural pluralism, the disputations were sort of indispensable or necessary. And so the church decided in favor of disputations. And the book of sentences of Peter the Lombard was made the textbook in all faculties of theology in all European universities. So that's the end of this period, and the start of a new period is the end of the period of like church evaluation of scholastic philosophy, or first examples of scholasticism like Anselm of Canterbury, Pierre Abelard, or Peter of Lombard. But then the church decided in favor of scholasticism and ushered sort of a certain epoch of the of the reign of scholastic philosophy. And well, next time we'll speak about the most famous of those scholastics, Saint Thomas Aquinas, Italian, who made a certain kind of a revolution in theology. I think even he is known even in Nigeria, Saint Thomas Aquinas, because there's a lot of seminaries named after Thomas Aquinas, or churches even. The relics of some Thomas Aquinas are held in the French city of Toulouse, in the cathedral in Toulouse. I've seen them when I was in Toulouse in the south of France. I saw the relics of St. Thomas Aquinas. So I think he's an important personality, but we have only 7 minutes, so I prefer to start the new theme from in a new lecture, okay? So now I'm going to answer your questions. Maybe you have questions about the future examination in philosophy, history, philosophy, and methodology of science. Or you can ask me how this scholastic philosophy corresponds to the history of science. Well, if you want the second question, ask the second question, I can have a ready answer. That this culture of disputations greatly helped the promotion of scientific knowledge in during the Middle Ages, and created the atmosphere which was favorable to such innovations as Copernican heliocentrical system and the disputations of Galileo, because the famous book of Galileo was also called a dialogue about the two world systems. And if you read this dialogue of Galileo, you will see that it is the continuation of this culture of disputations. So the promoters of Ptolemean view or geocentrical view of the solar system, they have their own arguments, and the proponents of Copernican system, they have their arguments. So without argumentation, there can be no science, okay? Science is, even defending your thesis is also a kind of arguments, and perhaps when you will defend your thesis, somebody will object against your like positions which you want to defend, okay? Your main points, and you have to keep in mind how to argue in favor of your own thesis, of your own points that you defend in your work, okay, scientific work. So if you want to ask me about the exam, I'm not sure yet whether it will be an exam or it will be just a pass or zachot in Russian. So I will ask Masha Kaplina and she will inform me, and then I will inform you. Or if you know already what awaits you in, say, in December, so you can also share this knowledge with me. Now I'm not yet sure what will we do in December, how I will evaluate your knowledge or how I will put your mark. I'm not quite sure, but I think we'll find the solution. I hope so. So if you have questions, please, you are welcome. We have 4 minutes. Well, I think people are just silent, so perhaps everything is clear, yes? Then please tell me what is the weather in Nigeria, if somebody of you are in Nigeria. Is it hot there or not?
It's fairly hot.
How many degrees do you have?
31, 33, thereabout.
21? Well, 21 is quite a lot.
Yeah,
we have only 9 degrees today. Northern part, it's cold, yes? Okay, maybe. But in Moscow, we have only 9 degrees. And I think Ojeswini can confirm because she's staying in Dolgoprudny. So, yes, it is hot inside the dormitory, but it's cold outside in the street. Yeah? Yeah, okay. So we are doing philosophy in very hard conditions, demanding conditions.
Nigeria is 34 degrees today.
24?
34.
34.
34. Yes.
34. This is unbearable. How do you survive? You have perhaps air conditioning. Air conditioning. Or what do you have? Or maybe you just get accustomed to such heat. For me, it's quite demanding. 34. Okay. I hope in dormitory you don't have 34 degrees, no? Ojeswini. Yes, of course, it goes without saying that medieval period was dominated by the church, of course. So that's why there is a difficulty, because my Russian students usually have no information about Christian theology, so especially Catholic theology. So I have to make an introduction just to tell them what are the main tenets of the Catholic religion. And my students sometimes accuse me of proselytizing, that I'm just using my time as a philosopher to speak about Christianity. But, well, I'm not sure that they are right. I think this is a part of academic training, that you know the essentials of different philosophies and different religions. Well, I think it is normal. Well, now I have less than 1 minute, so I can only thank once again Ojeswini for hosting us and sharing with us the demonstration of the Canterbury Cathedral, and wish everybody good evening. Okay?
Good evening, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much.